"Dad, how much longer are you planning to just sit there?" That was how my son Kevin spoke to me. Not "Good morning, Dad." Not "How'd you sleep?" Just that. 7 words that told me exactly what I had become in his house, a piece of furniture he was tired of looking at. I'm 68 years old. I spent 31 years working at the post office, sorting mail, walking routes in the Ohio heat and the Ohio cold, never missing a shift unless I was physically unable to stand. I raised Kevin on my own after his mother, Diane, passed from breast cancer when he was 14. I worked doubles on holidays so he could have Christmas gifts under the tree. I paid his college tuition out of pocket, $22,000 over 4 years, because I didn't want him starting his adult life buried in debt. I did all of that without complaint, without keeping score, because that's what fathers do. Or at least, that's what I always believed. When I retired, I had a modest pension, $1,100 a month, and a small house in Dayton that I'd owned outright for 9 years. Nothing fancy. 3 bedrooms, a yard with a maple tree I'd planted the year Diane died, a kitchen where I knew every sound the pipes made in winter. It was mine. I'd earned it, every square foot of it. The plan to sell it and move in with Kevin wasn't my idea. I want to make that clear. It started after I had a mild heart episode. My cardiologist called it a warning event, not a full attack, but enough to put me in the hospital for 2 days. Kevin drove up from Columbus, sat by my bed, held my hand and said, "Dad, I don't want you alone in that house anymore. Come live with us. We have the space. Brianna and I talked about it. We want you there." Brianna is Kevin's wife. They'd been married 6 years. I'd always found her pleasant enough at holidays. Polished, put together, the kind of woman who kept her home like a showroom and her feelings just as curated. But Kevin said she wanted me there, and I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. So I sold the house. A young couple bought it. They had a toddler and another one on the way, and they cried at the closing because it was their first home. I shook the husband's hand and told him the maple tree did well with water in August. The sale netted me $104,000. Kevin suggested I contribute to the household. Just to make things fair, he said. Help with the mortgage a little, groceries, utilities. That seemed reasonable. I gave him $40,000 up front to help with the addition they were planning. A sunroom off the back of the house, he said. That would be my private space. I also agreed to put in $600 a month from my pension toward household expenses. That left me $500 a month for myself. Not much, but I figured I didn't need much. I had food, shelter, family. That was 14 months ago. The sunroom was never built. What nobody tells you about moving into your adult child's home is how quickly you learn the difference between being welcomed and being tolerated. The first month, things were fine. Kevin grilled on weekends. Brianna made dinner most nights and set a place for me at the table. Their kids, my grandchildren, 8-year-old Mason and 5-year-old Ava, climbed on me and showed me their drawings and wanted me to read to them before bed. I thought this is going to be okay. More than okay. But something shifted around the 6-week mark. I still can't point to a single moment when it happened. It was gradual, the way a room gets cold. You don't notice each individual degree dropping until you realize you're shivering. Brianna stopped setting my place at the table. I'd come downstairs and the 3 of them would be eating, and I'd have to get my own plate, my own food, stand at the counter to fix it while they sat. Kevin stopped grilling on weekends. When I tried to watch the evening news in the living room, Brianna would come in after 20 minutes and say she needed to put something on for the kids, and the channel would change without a word to me. I started eating alone in my room most nights. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I was just adjusting. Then came the money conversations. Kevin started dropping comments over small things. I'd leave a light on in my room and he'd say, "Electric bills aren't cheap, Dad." I'd take a longer shower and he'd mention the water heater. Once I made myself a late-night sandwich and he saw the open refrigerator and said, "We're going through groceries pretty fast lately." I was eating a sandwich. In my son's kitchen. With my own food money having gone into his account every month. One evening I overheard him and Brianna talking in the kitchen after they thought I'd gone to bed. I wasn't eavesdropping. I'd come down for a glass of water, and their voices carried clearly down the hallway. "He just sits there all day," Brianna said. "He doesn't do anything. He doesn't help with the kids. He doesn't do any housework. He's 68, Bri." I know how old he is, Kevin. I'm just saying. We basically have a 4th dependent. I stood in that hallway for a long moment. Then I went back upstairs without my water. I want to tell you I confronted them that night. I want to tell you I walked into that kitchen and said something with dignity, something measured and clear. But I didn't. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, and I thought about the maple tree I'd left behind in Dayton. I thought about the young couple with their toddler and their new baby and their whole life ahead of them in my house. I thought about Diane and what she would have said, and I decided she would have said, "Don't let this be your whole ending." I didn't sleep much after that. The morning everything broke open was a Tuesday in March. Cold, gray, the kind of Ohio morning that makes you feel like the sun has simply decided not to bother. I was in the kitchen making oatmeal when Kevin came downstairs in his work clothes, poured his coffee, and stood leaning against the counter looking at me in a way I'd never seen him look at me before. Like he was calculating something. "Dad," he said, "I need to talk to you about the finances." I turned the burner down and waited. "Brianna and I have been crunching numbers," he said. "The $600 a month isn't really covering what we'd hoped. With you here, our grocery bill's up, our utilities are up, and we still haven't been able to do the sunroom because we had other expenses come up." I asked him calmly what he was suggesting. "We were thinking more like $900, he said, "a month. And honestly, we might need to talk about the rest of what you got from the Dayton house. You've still got $64,000 sitting in savings, right? It's just sitting there. My money, my 31 years of postal routes in the rain. Just sitting there." I asked him, "Kevin, what exactly am I to you right now?" He blinked. "What? Am I your father, or am I a tenant you're trying to price correctly?" His face did something complicated. Not shame, or maybe shame mixed with something harder, more defensive. "That's not fair," he said. "We're supporting you. Do you know what it costs to have an extra person in this house? Your medication alone." "My medication," I said, "is covered by Medicare Part D. It costs me $11 a month." He didn't seem to know that, which told me something about how much of my actual life he'd paid attention to. "The point is," he said, louder now, "you don't contribute. You sit here, you watch TV, you eat our food, your food that I'm paying $600 a month toward. It's not enough, Dad. I'm sorry, but it's not." I looked at my son for a long moment. He was 41 years old. He had his mother's dark eyes and my stubbornness, and somewhere along the way, he had become someone I didn't entirely recognize. I thought about the Christmas I worked a double shift at the post office so he could wake up to a bicycle under the tree. I thought about the night Diane died, and I sat outside his bedroom door for 2 hours because I could hear him crying, and I didn't know if going in would help or make it worse. I thought about the college tuition, the $22,000, the graduation ceremony where he shook my hand instead of hugging me, and I told myself that was just how young men were. I turned off the burner. "All right," I said. "All right, what?" "All right, Kevin. I hear you." I put my bowl in the sink and I went upstairs, and I started packing. I didn't pack everything. I packed what mattered. My important documents, my medications, Diane's photograph, the watch my own father gave me the year I joined the postal service, 2 changes of clothes, my phone charger. I moved quietly and deliberately, the way you move when you've made a decision that you know is right, and you don't want anything to interrupt you before you finish making it. I had my bag over my shoulder, and I was coming down the stairs when Kevin appeared at the bottom of them. He'd stayed home from work, apparently. Or maybe he'd never left. I don't know. "Dad." His voice was different now. "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving, Kevin. You can't just— Where are you going to go?" "I'll figure it out." "Dad, come on. Don't be dramatic about this. We were just having a conversation." "We were having a conversation in which you told me I don't contribute to your household while taking $600 of my pension every month," I said. "I don't want to have that conversation again." Brianna appeared behind him in the hallway, arms crossed, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Mason peeked around her from the living room doorway. 5 seconds, maybe. He looked at me with his big eyes and then disappeared back around the corner. I walked to the front door. "Dad, you're being ridiculous," Kevin said. "You're 68, you had a heart episode. You can't just walk out and—" I opened the front door. The air outside was cold and clean, and I stood on the front step for a moment, my bag over my shoulder, thinking, I have $64,000 in a savings account. I have $1,100 a month in pension and Social Security coming in. Because yes, Kevin, I also have Social Security, $1,500 a month, which I hadn't mentioned to him because he'd never asked. That's $2,600 a month total. I am not a man without options. I am just a man who forgot that for a little while. I sat on a bench at the end of the street for about 20 minutes, just breathing. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't scared. I was. 68 years old, nowhere to be that night, bag on my shoulder, breath coming out in clouds in the March cold. I called my primary care doctor's office to make sure I had enough medication refills. I called my bank to confirm my balance. Practical things. Things you do when you're trying to keep the panic at arm's length. Then my phone rang. It was a number I recognized but hadn't seen in almost 2 years. Leonard Ashby. Leonard and I had worked together at the post office for almost 15 years. He'd retired a few years before me, moved to a place he'd inherited from his parents. A house on a quiet street in Westerville, Ohio, big yard, 2nd bedroom that had been empty since his daughter moved to Portland. We'd stayed in sporadic contact, holiday texts, the occasional call. He'd heard about my heart episode, through a mutual friend from the postal union and had been meaning to call, he said. He'd been thinking about me. I told him where I was sitting. I told him what had just happened. There was a long pause on the line. You got your bag with you? Leonard said. Yeah. You need a place tonight? Leonard, I've got a bedroom nobody's using. I've got a kitchen and a coffee maker and a driveway. You can stay until you figure out your next move, however long that takes. I sat there on that bench and I felt something shift in my chest. Not the bad kind of shift. Not the kind that had put me in the hospital. The other kind. The kind that means something that was clenched is finally letting go. I don't want to put you out, I said. Raymond, Leonard said. That's my name, Raymond Hollis. I retired 6 months ago. I have watched more daytime television than any person should legally be allowed to. I would very much appreciate the company. I laughed. First time I'd laughed in what felt like months. Leonard picked me up in his Buick 45 minutes later. His house was everything he'd described. A 1970s ranch style on a shaded street, comfortable and lived in, with a workshop in the garage where he was building a dining table by hand. He showed me the second bedroom, clean, simply furnished. A window that looked out over the backyard. He'd clearly straightened it up in a hurry because there was a vacuum cleaner still in the corner that he looked mildly embarrassed about. Not the Ritz, he said. It's perfect, I said, and I meant it. I spent the first 2 nights just decompressing. Sleeping without tension in my shoulders. Sitting in Leonard's kitchen drinking coffee in the morning without calculating whether I was using too much electricity by being awake before 7. He made a point of not asking me too many questions, which I appreciated. He just let me be. After a couple of days we started talking, really talking, the way men our age rarely let themselves do. About retirement. About the strange feeling of being done with work and not quite knowing who you are without it. About loneliness, which we both danced around before one of us finally just said the word. Leonard had been on his own since his wife Carol passed 4 years ago. His daughter called every Sunday but lived her own life in Oregon, which was how it should be. He had his workshop in his yard and a rotating cast of postal retirees he played cards with on Thursday nights. He was fine, but fine and good aren't the same thing, and we both knew that. I called my bank in that first week and had my pension and Social Security redirected to my account instead of being split between my account and Kevin's. I contacted a senior housing advisor. There are HUD-approved housing counselors who help seniors navigate housing options for free, which I didn't know about and wish I had known earlier, and started looking at my options. Independent living communities, senior apartments, a few properties I could potentially buy with what I had in savings and what I'd pull in monthly. I was not, it turned out, without options. I had never been without options. I had just been too tired and too beaten down to see them clearly. About 3 weeks into my stay with Leonard, Kevin called. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message. His voice was different, flatter, more careful, like someone who'd rehearsed what he was going to say and was concentrating on delivering it correctly. He said he and Brianna had talked and they thought things had gotten out of hand. He said he was sorry if I felt unwelcome. If. That word does a lot of work in an apology and not good work. He called again the next day. Then Brianna called, which surprised me. Her message was shorter and, in a way, more honest. She said she knew things hadn't been comfortable for me and that she'd reflected on how she might have made it harder. It wasn't a full apology, but it was closer to a real one than Kevin's. I called Kevin back after a few days. I want to be honest about that conversation because I think it matters. I did not yell at him. I did not lay out a list of grievances the way part of me wanted to. What I said was this: Kevin, I love you. You're my son and there is nothing on this earth that changes that. But the way I was made to feel in your home, like I was a burden, like my presence needed to be justified financially, like I was less than a guest, that's going to take me a while to get past. I need some time, and I need you to understand that what happened wasn't okay. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I know, Dad, I know. We didn't say much more than that. But it was something. It was a door cracked open, and sometimes that's what you have to work with. 4 months after I left Kevin's house, I signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment in Westerville, 12 minutes from Leonard's workshop. Senior community, well-maintained indoor common areas, a small gym I told myself I'd actually use. My share of the rent was $720 a month after my senior rental assistance benefit. Yes, that exists, yes, I'd qualified for it and nobody in Kevin's house had ever mentioned looking into it on my behalf. I had money left in savings. I had my pension and Social Security. I had more financial stability than I'd had in over a year, living inside my son's house. I put a small table and 2 chairs by the window that looked out over the parking lot and the trees beyond it. I put Diane's photograph on the shelf where I could see it from my reading chair. I got a coffee maker that made exactly the strength I like, and nobody changed the settings on it. I called my grandkids, Mason and Ava, and FaceTimed with them on a Saturday afternoon and read Ava a picture book through the screen while she held it up to the camera with great seriousness, making sure I could see every page. She made me promise to come visit on her birthday in June. I promised. Leonard came over the first Sunday I was in the apartment with a 6-pack of pale ale and a housewarming gift. A small woodworking project he'd made in his shop. A little plaque with a phrase he said Carol used to have on their kitchen wall. Make room for what's good. He'd routed the letters himself. I put it on the wall above my kitchen table. We have dinner together most Thursdays now. Sometimes I go to the card game with the postal retirees. There's a good group of men there, a little younger, a little older, all of us trying to figure out what this chapter is supposed to look like. I've started taking a walk every morning, doctor's orders, 40 minutes around the neighborhood. My blood pressure is the best it's been in 3 years. My cardiologist was pleased in a way that doctors rarely let themselves show. Kevin and I talk on the phone about once a week now. It's not what it was, or maybe it's more honest than it ever was, which is something else entirely. He came to visit once, by himself, and we sat at my little table by the window, and I made coffee and we talked for 3 hours. He cried once, briefly, and looked embarrassed about it. I told him not to be. Brianna sent me a birthday card in April. It was a start. I'm not going to tell you I found everything I was looking for when I walked out that front door in March. That's not how any of this works, and I think you already know that. But I'll tell you what I found. I found out that 68 is not the end of anything. I found out that the people who see your worth without being asked to, the Leonard Ashbys of the world, are worth more than a whole house full of people who need convincing. I found out that independence is not just about money. Though yes, please keep your money. Do not hand $64,000 to your adult children. I cannot stress this enough. It's about knowing that you still have a self that belongs to you. Diane's photograph is on my shelf. The plaque Leonard made is on my wall. The coffee is exactly the right strength. That at 68 is not nothing. That is, I've come to understand quite a lot.